What did you do to be able to learn how to structurally set that up?
Oh, fuck it up over and over again. After we finally did get some advertising and some stuff going, whatever, we didn't have a finance person, so I did the finance.
Oh, good. For how long?
6 months, until, in fact, this happened. Somebody said, what have we done about VAT? And, so I hadn't done anything about VAT. Suddenly start thinking, shit.
There's a vat of beer in the corner, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing there is. There's the bat.
Yes.
There's a bat for the ping pong, but there wasn't any VAT.
Trials, tribulations, mistakes, barriers, successes and failures. Hear it here firsthand from those that have grown billion-dollar businesses to those that are just starting out. Winner of the Campaign Publishing Award for Best Business Podcast in the UK, Success is in the Mind is the only place where you can get a sense of business reality in a world full of idealism. Everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but can everyone live up to the title? What does it take to start a business, to get your product into a high street store or grow a well-managed team? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself. Join me as I interview business leaders and founders from across the globe, delving into what makes them tick, their differentiators and intrinsic motivators. This is Success is in the Mind. Success is in the Mind is proud to be sponsored by Coronation Wealth Management, a professional service providing tailored financial advice to business owners, entrepreneurs, managers and clients looking to grow and protect their wealth or reach their financial goals. The team at Coronation Wealth provides services including retirement, investment, protection and business planning. To find out more, go to coronationwealth.co.uk. The&Partnership, founded in 2001 by Johnny Hornby, puts together the spirits of an entrepreneurial media agency and the might of a global media powerhouse. With a plethora of experience, Johnny Hornby now has 1,400 staff. He was tipped to be the successor for Martin Sorrell at WPP, a guest that we incidentally had on the podcast earlier this year. Johnny is also the chairman of Prince Harry's charity Sentinel and headed up Tony Blair's successful election campaign in 2001. I asked Johnny Hornby, is he the real life Don Draper? We've had questions submitted by listeners and team members to this episode, so sit back, relax, get a pen and paper, and welcome to the show, Johnny Hornby.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Before we get into your illustrious career, I wanted to dial back the clock ever so slightly to when you were at Marlborough College, when you were at Edinburgh University, and just look at your childhood and your upbringing. What was that like?
I mean, it's always much more romantic, isn't it, in these stories if you depict a childhood that was hard knocks and difficult, and that would be more compelling as a story, but one has to be honest. And I was very, very fortunate to be born into a talented family who were, relatively successful. My father in business, my mother in journalism, and therefore I sort of was lucky enough to grow up in a very sort of stimulating environment where there were always lots of people in the house, from business leaders to political figures to journalists, novelists, etc. And my parents were very social and enjoyed lots of debate and were also, I guess, quite forward-thinking for the time because they were very keen to make sure that all the children were engaged. So we sat and ate with them and their friends. And so I think that I was very, very lucky to be in such a stimulating environment.
Do you know, during your childhood, what kind of inspired you to take the career path that you've taken? Was there a pivotal moment where you go, that is exactly the point I realised I wanted to go into agency life?
I don't think I knew it was agency life, but I think sort of in the widest sense, the world of media was very close to home. My mother was a journalist with Radio 4 on Woman's Hour. She was interviewing the likes of the Beatles, Margaret Thatcher, Rosalind and Jimmy Carter, and would come home at the weekend and talk about those things. My half brother was, starting his career as a novelist. My half sister married Robert Harris at the time, who was the 28 years old, the political editor of The Observer. As a family, we were also quite connected to New Labour.
Yeah.
Whether it was, Peter Mandelson or others, that was all sort of part of the life for us at home. And therefore, I guess that world, the wider world of media, intrigued me. And
you allude to New Labour or being connected when you were a child. In 2001, you ran Blair's election campaign, did you not? Was that through connections which your parents and your family had harnessed from a younger age?
No, not really. I had come to meet Peter Mandelson through my brother-in-law, through his work then at The Observer as political editor, and then I had and then knew Philip Gould and various people, and I had volunteered back in the day, in the earlier days, pre-Blair, when they had a thing called Friends of Labour. So they didn't have an advertising agency as such. They had people who offered to donate their time to work for sort of Labour's cause, people in communications. And I was part of that. And that's really how I got sort of to know Peter well and the late Philip Gould, who were very much at the heart of those things, and people like Alistair Campbell. And then in 1998, we actually pitched when I was at TBWA for Labour to do what was probably one of the most unsuccessful campaigns anyone's ever run, which was I was very much at the heart of, which was Frank Dobson's campaign to be Mayor of London.
Nice of you to own up to it being so disastrous.
Yeah, it was a terrible campaign in every way. So we had a very naff campaign theme, which is "It's time to be frank about London."
Right, I see what you did there, Johnny. I like it.
Quite poor, isn't it? But not only that, what was very sort of amusing in hindsight was that at the time everyone sort of loved New Labour, and so we said that we were running Frank's New Labour's campaign. So I said to all the people who had been Friends of Labour in the days before they appointed agencies, would everyone like to come and join in? And we're going to have a breakfast. And so on the first morning, everyone turned up. And then so it's croissants for 50 people. And the first set of polls come out and Philip presents them. And it shows that, Frank is on a hiding to nothing. And by week 3 of these Friends of Labour breakfasts, it was me, Frank, and a pile of croissants and a set of increasingly terrible results. And I think that was almost the way that we, in a way, by the time we got to 2001, we had paid our dues to the Labour Party by trying to run this campaign at which, if you can remember, Frank had no chance of winning.
And the only expenses scandal then would have been around the reclaiming of the croissant bill.
The huge pile of uneaten croissants.
Yes, exactly. And going back to your siblings, I mean, they're equally as successful as yourself. I mean, you alluded last time we spoke to. Oh, that's very, very, very kind. But your sister is heads up Prince William and Kate Middleton's charity.
Yes, well, she set up the Royal Foundation and has now sort of set up an offshoot of that, which Prince William and Kate are still very much involved in, called Shout, which is a mental health phone-based helpline, which has been incredibly useful for those increasing numbers of people, both pre and post-pandemic, that are suffering with mental health. She does that, and of course, my half sister Jill is a novelist, as is my brother Nick.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of how they got into such a philanthropic world, what allowed them to do that? Because so many people want to give back, so many people can't give back. But yourself heading up Prince Harry's charity as well, you're able to give back to people like no one else can. How do you do that? How do you have time?
Well, again, in some cases, it's a bit of luck and fortune, isn't it? In the sense that there are lots of people that want to give back, and actually, there's lots of people who give back. Funny enough, I was talking to my sister about. She was saying actually one of the people that work in one of our teams. I was unaware of this. Works for us by day and actually volunteers for her at night as a trained helper on the phone. And so I guess I'm kind of lucky enough to have set up a successful business, and my partners and I have always sort of felt like putting something back as a business, whether it's into something that you're passionate about. So when it was the Labour Party, we always did that as a sort of pro bono thing, because we felt that if Labour and New Labour, would make the country a better, fairer place and enhance the life chances of those who were less fortunate, then that was a good use of our time, even if it wasn't, economically sort of profitable for us. And I think we think the same thing across our partnership about charity. So all the partners in our business are free to put forward a charitable endeavour that they would like to do with their teams, and so long as the rest of the team feels similarly, we try around the world now to give all of our partners the time to give back. And listen, I don't think we're unique in that. I think all companies now are, if you want to attract the best talent, it used to be about how quickly will I get promoted, how much will I get paid. I think now this generation of young people coming into the workplace are saying, what is this organisation for? What's its sense of purpose? How will I be making a difference in a world in a way that I think is very different to when we were all younger? And I think it is a good thing.
And in terms of when, how the world has changed, you very much went into agency as an employee, and then you eventually became a kind of entrepreneur, started your own agency and have scaled it from there. How has the agency world changed since you joined to where you are now?
I mean, I think the agency world's been turned upside down, just like probably every other sector's been turned upside down by the internet. So, when I first joined the world of advertising, it was about three things. It was TV commercials, poster and print, and the wireless, that was basically what advertising was about, and it was largely driven by having a big creative idea and trying to put it in front of as many people as possible, which wasn't that difficult to do from a media perspective, because there were, in the UK, 4 channels. Few
Yes.
radio stations and some poster sites. So it wasn't. In retrospect, it was far from rocket science. If you look at it now, there's a vast proliferation of channels, including social media channels and platforms, disparate audiences everywhere, and therefore, if it used to be all about the mad men,
Yes.
mad women, men and women.
I'm glad you picked up on that.
Mad men and women, of course. That the people with the other side of the brain, the maths people, have become equally important. So I think it's become, the advertising business now is still about creativity, but equally about the deployment of that creativity and content, which is a lot about understanding data and the deployment of content and how it works, using technology, and that is a sea change from where we were 25 years ago.
And we'll get into the ever-changing landscape shortly, but just picking it back up to when you got into agency life, I'm fascinated by how quickly you came, or you grew, I suppose, from a career point of view, from a graduate trainee to an account director to then managing director in less than 7 years. You graduated university and you then became MD of TBWA in 7 years. How did you have such rapid growth within a company from essentially knowing nothing?
Probably a bigger indictment on the advertising industry at the time that allows somebody to do that, isn't it?
Again, luck, isn't it? It's all about luck.
Well, I was going to say, if the industry was like it is today, where you really needed to understand technology and social media platforms, data and whatever, I probably would have taken me an extra 15 years to get there. But but I think the other thing that sometimes happens to people when they get into, I started slightly late. I did 4 years at Edinburgh University, and so I was sort of 24, 25 by the time I started my career, and I think by then I was chomping at the bit, and I sort of decided that this was what I wanted to do. I worked all my holidays in agency, so by the time I sort of left university, it's what I really wanted to do, and I think I threw myself into it in a way that people talk now quite rightly about having a work-life balance and giving you a sense of perspective. And I think for those 7 years, I literally did nothing but eat, sleep, and drink advertising in the days when you were allowed to drink.
Did you smoke? Did you smoke as well? Get a full Mad Men or not?
I smoked. I think I used to try and see if I could get through 2 packets of cigarettes every day.
Every day? That's good going.
Every day. And you did, and also you just realize again how the world's changed. I managed to, through hypnosis 15 years ago, give up smoking altogether. But
you did that? Wow.
When I started in my first agency as an account executive, part of my job was to make sure that the cigarette trays in the middle of the meeting room were full for the client meeting.
It does beg a belief, but you're going to tell me now that you were a man that used to drink old-fashioned as well. Was that your tipple?
Well, no, but we've all moved on, haven't we? I was just thinking we used to smoke on the tube on the way to work. No, so I think smoking and drinking and all of that were part of the world that, I entered back in the day before the internet and before we all thought differently about how we behaved at work and etc. And so I think we've all evolved a long way, probably for good reasons.
So in 2001, you founded CHI and Partners, and that is still in business today, still runs today. What is the difference between that business and essentially the business that you've currently got now, the And-Partnership?
So CHI was probably not unlike, the story of our agency isn't unlike the beginning of it anyway, every other ad agency back in the day, which is, 3 people, a creative person, a strategist and account person. For some reason, I don't know why we're supposed to be experts in branding, putting their names above the door. So is that a good? So it was called Clemo Hornby. At the same time as Bartle, Bogle, Hegarty, and everyone was called Biggles, Boggles, and what's it?
It gives you gravitas, doesn't it?
Gave us, thinking that's brilliant branding, and then the client would say, "Why are we taking these guys' advice on branding when you're called?" When I started, because there were 3 merged agencies. When I started at TBWA, we were called TBWA GGT Simons Palmer.
Your .com.
Yeah, and somebody said, "Why?" We still weren't sure what .com meant.
No, that's fair.
But you suddenly think, why is anybody taking branding advice from us? But so what happened is we, for our first 5 or 6 years, were very much like every other advertising. We pitched, we made ads. Most of them were television and print. We tried to win awards at Cannes. We wanted to be more famous than everyone else. We tried to get our name in campaign as often as possible. That was what you did.
We won an award in campaign, by the way, for this podcast, Johnny. I kid you not.
That is, I'll tell you what, that's all I ever used to care about is how often my own campaign.
That's success.
But as I said, as one could see, and I've made lots of mistakes in my career, but one of the things I could start to see by the kind of 2007, 2008 is you really didn't want to be in the business of creating content and be divorced from the deployment of that content. So when we sold 49% of our business to WPP, my 2 partners, soon after, the C and the I, decided they wanted to kind of retire and do other things. They've been very successful and etc. And so you then thought, okay, Clemo Hornby without the Clemo and the Bing sounds a bit crap if it's Hornby, and I also wanted to involve a whole load of other people from other disciplines in the business. So I said, actually, let's celebrate the people who create the content and the people who deploy the content being as one. So we changed the name to the And-Partnership, celebrating, if you like, kind of the genius of the and rather than the tyranny of the or. And I turned the firm then into a kind of using a legal, like legal practices, a partnership where different people could get to a certain stage in the business, be elected by their peers as partners, then become vested in and owners in over time of their own kind of futures. And that has probably been, as I say, I've done countless stupid things, but that was one that was a smart thing to do. And I think the fact that our business today still has, probably 15 or 16 partners in it that have been through that entire journey is a real strength of our business. And whereas lots of clients will say, well, the problem with agency people or whatever is that you'll see them at one agency 1 week and 3 weeks later you pitch the business and they're somewhere else. That's not true here. And I think part of the reason that if I look at some of our clients, whether it's in the UK, a NatWest, a British Gas, a News UK, those clients that we won in 2001, 2002, 2003 are still with us today because, the people that run that business and work on that business are partners in our business, but essentially partners in their business because they know that the people that run their account sort of are vested in their business. So that's been the heart of our success, I think.
So what was the decision with the 3 different, or the other 2 shareholders within the business to shift that? Was it you that fundamentally went, guys, we need to shift this 49%, or was it a general quorum, or how did that conversation go? Because someone must have stimulated it.
It was a kind of blend of the boys feeling that they had loved the 7 years that we'd had together, creating advertising, building brands, etc. They had both been very successful before we started. Charles had an amazing career at Lowe's. He had the only person to have been awarded to the level that he had at Cannes in terms of the numbers of Grand Prix that he'd won. The only person who'd won 2 Grand Prix. And so he'd already had a massively successful career. Simon Clemo had an agency previously that he sold to TBWA. So from their point of view, I think they'd achieved a lot of what they had wanted to achieve. I'm a little bit younger than them, slightly the next generation. So I think when I was talking about my sort of dream for the agency and in the future of being more connected to media, more connected to data, digital, etc., I didn't foresee all the things that were going to happen as a result of the internet, but just that general sense. I'm not pretending I could see Instagram coming. If I had, I should have started it. But I could sense that was the direction of travel,
mm-hmm.
and therefore I think it meant a new chapter for the agency. And I think, listen, a combination of things. You need to ask the boys, but Martin Sorrell at the time made us a very, very valuable offer for the 49% of our business.
What did he offer?
He offered us, he valued our business, I think, in 2007 at £60 million.
And what was the equity split between you three?
Well, the three of us were equal.
Well, you. Oh, okay, fine. Oh, okay. And how did that affect decisions then? Because obviously, I suppose you'd have to. One of you would be the majority. I suppose it would tip it.
And well, so up until the point that we did that with Martin, we always agreed that all three of us had to agree on everything, otherwise it couldn't go forward. But all three of us did agree that it would be interesting to shift the business in another direction. And as part of that, I said if the boys, when they wanting to spend less time in the business, wanted to spend less time in the business, I really wanted to find a way to get a new set of partners, alongside me for the future. So the combination of them being able to take a lot of Martin Sorrell's value off the table.
Yeah.
They still that said, they still own shares in the business, and the business in 2007 was about what it was. I can remember exactly. It was 20 million of revenue and was valued at sort of 60 million. And this year it'll do 140 million of revenue. So it's grown enormously since then. I'm proud that the boys are still partners and still shareholders.
And that's plugged into WPP still, is it?
And WPP still own the same 49.9% that they own in that they took in 2007. Yeah, so it's been the same for 14 years. The only difference being that obviously the boys shared their partnership with a wider group of partners who are now other partners in the Partnership.
And we'll get on to WPP because I'm fascinated by that story more so in a minute in terms of your synergy with Martin there. But in terms of before you even shifted your business, the 60 million revenue there, or indeed the buyout, you had the best luck in the world in terms of being able to open up your office quite literally above Carphone warehouse, just simply because you poached that client from your previous agency, TBWA, and somehow had no rent, and that scaled you from essentially nothing to essentially that valuation a couple of years down the line. Now, that was a massive bit of luck. How did you strike that deal?
Well, I had a very supportive client in the founder of the Carphone warehouse, Charles Dunson as he was, so Charles Dunson as he is now. And actually, TBWA, we had a very happy parting, oddly enough. I thought it was a great...
Even though you poached their most valuable client.
Yeah, it was incredibly friendly. I'll tell you why. And it's credit to Paul Bainsfair, who's, leads the IPA nowadays. He was chairman of TBWA. I was running the Labour Party account in 2001. The Labour, everyone will probably forget this, but there was foot and mouth disease, which put the general election back. And so thinking the general election was going to be earlier than it was, I went to see Paul and said, look, I've always had this dream of starting my own agency. It was difficult for the management of TBWA at the time to say that they disagreed with such a thing, because Paul Bainsfair had started his own agency, Bainsfair Sharkey Trot, which TBWA had bought.
Again, name above the door.
Yeah, and exactly another one. And Carl Johnson had started Simons Palmer Johnson, Johnson.
Classic, like it.
And they'd also and they were the management. And I said, guys, I tell you what I'd love to do. I'd love to do what you guys have done and start my own agency, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that in a way that, pulls the doors down here and et cetera, et cetera. So I said, I wanted to give you fair notice of this, and I'd like to continue to run the Labour Party account for you, but once the election's over, in a couple of months' time, I'd like to go. Then there was foot and mouth disease, which meant that it was put back another, I can't remember what it was, 4 or 5 months. And so they hadn't yet sort of worked out exactly how they wanted succession and everything else to work. And I said, well, look, I tell you what, why don't we do this? I'll look after all your clients until I go. I will sign something promising you that I won't take any people or clients for the next 2 years, because everyone gets paranoid saying, if you start your own agency, is Johnny going to try and take all of our best people and all of our clients? And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll sign something saying I won't take any of the clients if you let me take the Carphone warehouse, which at the time they knew Charles was, I was Charles's best man, and he was my best man. Okay. And so they sort of knew that one was going whatever. Yeah. So we sort of did a deal. Says, I tell you what, if Charles, they said, there's no way Charles isn't going with you. I said, okay, well, I tell you what, let's do this. I'll take Charles and I'll sign something to say I won't go near any of your clients or any of your people for the next 2 years. And Paul Bainsfair said, fair enough. And in case you need some help, why don't you keep some laptops and some whatever? So they helped us out and they gave us a whole load of stuff to go and start our agency. And actually, it was very smart of Paul, because oddly enough, not only did I not go and take any of their clients for the next 2 years, but I never went out of my way to take a TBWA client for as long as as long as Paul was there, because I was so respectful of him and the way he treated us. And actually, for me, if this podcast is a bit about what should people learn, I think what you learn is, of course, you want to be competitive in business, but also you want to recognize that in most industries, the people that are your competitors ideally can also be your friends and colleagues on the longer journey. And if you treat them well, things will work out well. And Paul Bainsfair treated me and us very well. And I hope he would say, if he was being interviewed, that we treated him well thereafter. So I think it was a good example just of people sort of being respectful of each other, and also respectful of the fact that lots of people in our business want to start their own agency. And I've had some people who've worked for me, and I was upset when they did it, but when they came into my office when they said we're going to go and start our own agency, it's quite hard for me to say, well, that's a really stupid idea given we've been very successful doing it. So I think all of us need to respect other entrepreneurs.
Our sponsors, Coronation Wealth Management, provide a professional service providing tailored financial advice to business owners, entrepreneurs, managers, and clients looking to grow and protect their wealth or reach their financial goals. This is how Coronation Wealth helped a senior manager in the medtech sector.
Being a senior international manager in a business that IPO'd, Coronation Wealth has helped hugely with my tax planning, as well as savings and investments off the back of the flotation.
The value of an investment with St James's Place will be directly linked to the performance of the funds you select, and the value can therefore go down as well as up. You may get back less than you invested. Coronation Wealth Management LLP is an appointed representative of and represents only St James's Place Wealth Management PLC, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority for the purpose of advising solely on the group's wealth management products and services, more details of which are set out on the group's website, www.sjp.co.uk/products. Sponsorship by Coronation Wealth Management does not imply endorsement of the service providers featured within these podcasts. So how much was Carphone Warehouse worth to you from day one then? First year?
I'm going to tell you, it was quite funny. Charles said, look, I'm going to help you with the account, and I'm going to help you with some office space. And, he liked Paul Bainsfair, become a friend of his. Bainsfair's given you some computers and you've got some whatever. He said, but we're now floating the business, so it would be inappropriate for me, given we're friends, to negotiate the fee. And so he said, you need to go and see my procurement people. And this was my first lesson in life. I was so excited. I thought, oh, it must be worth a fortune. The procurement people immediately hated me because, they knew that I was mates with Charles, and that there was no process, and that there hadn't been a pitch, and all the things that procurement would have imagined should have happened.
Yes, it keeps them employed. Yes.
So they turned me over completely and paid us very, very little.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was very little. And it's funny, I then bumped into Charles a couple of weekends later, and Charles was like, isn't it really exciting? I said, well, that's sort of exciting. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've sort of ended up with not being paid very much by your procurement people. And he said, well, surely that's a lesson for you in learning how to negotiate better with procurement people if you're going to run your own agency, which was a fair point. So I learned the hard way. And then he said, well, listen, I can't get involved in this. I can't. He said, I'll tell you what, though, you sometimes used to take, your clients out on my boat. Why don't I let you use the boat to take clients out on? And I said, well, Charles, it's really sweet of you, but the only client I've got is you. So it's going to be slightly weird if I ring you up and say, listen, thanks a lot for the business. I thought to thank you for that, I'd take you out on your own boat. But by the time we actually got round to the end of our first year, having had a slow start, we suddenly got on this run where we won Tango, Thai food tea, Telegraph. I can remember it all in the weeks run up to Christmas, having not had a phone call. But we started in the July. Between the July and the October, literally no one rang. We had nothing to do. We made like 2 ads for the Carphone Warehouse. We turned our boardroom table into a ping pong table.
I'm glad you did that. I did the same thing. I didn't have Carphone Warehouse, but I did the same thing.
I've got nothing to do. I'm going to have to put a net over the boardroom table and play whatever. And you start thinking, are we ever going to win anything? And do you think Paul Bain? And literally by November, I was sort of saying to my wife, do you think Paul Bainsfair would have me back? And then luckily we won sort of 3 pitches on the trot. Mm-hmm. And then amusingly, I called Charles in the May and said, we've entered your award at Cannes. Can we borrow? I'm going to take you up on that offer to of your boat. So we actually, for the next 15 years, had some fairly entertaining cans on Charles's boat, but we've since decided that yachts and drink and excess are no longer part of our brand or our behaviour, so we've given the boat back.
So it's all about dinghies and coffee now.
Dinghies and coffee and going on long runs.
Structurally then, how did you set the business up? Because it was you three guys whiff-waffing away in the boardroom. How did you know about setting up a business? Because you'd only worked for people previously, and you'd had seniors, you'd had juniors, granted, but you'd never run, I suppose, a team with equity and with actual overheads yourself. What did you do to be able to learn how to structurally set that up?
Oh, fuck it up over and over again. I mean, really interesting. Like, after we finally did get some advertising and some stuff going, whatever, we didn't have a finance person, so I did the finance.
Oh, good. For how long? 6
months, until, in fact, this happened. Somebody said, what have we done about VAT? So, what have we done about VAT? And, so I hadn't done anything about VAT. And so, suddenly start thinking, shit.
There's a vat of beer in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing there is. There's the bat. There's a bat for the ping pong, but there wasn't any VAT. So it was things like that. You suddenly start thinking, and you try and do these things yourself. And of course, when you're tiny, you've got no money. You do have to, because you haven't got the wherewithal to do it. You try and beg, borrow, and steal from other people's advice. And in our industry, I have to say also, people were wonderful. Competitors. I wrote to all of our competitors. They didn't think of us as competitors. We were three blokes playing ping pong, but all the people I admired in the business, and said, I've just set up my business with these two lads, and I think what you did was extraordinary. Would you spare me, 20 minutes for a coffee? And, you'd think you wouldn't get much back. And Nigel Bogle said, sure. And Leslie Butterfield said, sure. And, it was like Jim Kelly said, sure. I got a list of fantastic people that all said yes. And I wrote down, and I just asked them all the same simple questions, which are sort of like, what was one thing that you're really glad you did? What was one thing you wish you'd never done? You'd wish you'd never done. What advice would you give to, and I just wrote this down, and that really helped. But then it was also then some hard knocks lessons of realizing I'm not really a finance person, and I'm not really, and so each time we then won a piece of business, we'd treat ourselves to something we didn't have that we thought we needed, and you'd always have a longer list of things that you needed than you could have. So it says, okay, so we've won Thai food tea. Are we going to treat ourselves with A, and as I said to you, we always had to agree everything, all three of us, A, a photocopier, B, a PA, or C, someone to do the VAT a day a week.
What did you go for?
And he's sure, I can't remember. I think we went photocopy first, which is why we didn't get the VAT right. But so you sort of think, and you sort of build up from there. But what's exciting about it is you come to appreciate everything more. We won a piece of business, a project from Virgin, and a wonderfully talented client of ours who still, we made loads of friends as well over the years who are still friends to this day. Fantastically talented lady called Jane Angadia, who ran Virgin throughout, and we won this project from Virgin, and she sent us a fridge, one of those Smeg fridges.
You've still got that in your office, I saw on the camera.
Yeah, it's here. It's
there
behind
it is.
me. Yeah. It's still there, Jane Ann. Thank you. There it is.
It's aged well.
But it was just things like that. You just think, oh my God, look, we can have on Friday. We can have a beer, and and it's just like all the things that you took for granted working for a big agency. You go, that's our fridge. That's our. Look at that. We've got a security guard. Oh yeah, look. You just stand there, But also there are some things I have to say, as I look back also, that you have to be careful that when you get to a certain size, you can lose. So, and I think it's a reason, somebody once said this is sort of, the Romans understood this, which is why they sort of had centurions. As soon as an organization gets above 100, it becomes harder to manage, because up to 100, just about everybody knows everybody's name, and everybody, and in our first 4 or 5 years, something was like, people didn't have assistants, and there was a key fob code thing on the door, so when you leave, if you're the last person to leave, you turn the lights out and lock up the agency, and if they haven't been cleaned up, you put the coffee cups, in the plastic bag and tie it up and put them outside the door for the, people who take them away, so the agency isn't a mess the next day. And and in a way, we went through a period where we sort of missed that, going, what happened to that? Because that was such a good, and everyone felt it was their agency and it was their job, and they'd pick up the coffee cups. And then suddenly you reach that next stage of success where you've suddenly got 250 people or something. You go, I don't know everyone's name, which is annoying because I don't know, therefore, who has left all those coffee cups out. But have we somehow lost the sense of ownership in this place, that people think it's okay that they left the coffee cups out because, and they sort of go, yeah, because you then reach this point where you go, well, they maybe they don't feel it is their agency, like the first 50 people think it was. They just think it's a place that they currently work before they go and work at another place, which, by the way, isn't their fault. But you suddenly then realize you've lost some of the magic that's inherent in being a small business where everyone feels like they've won Thai food tea because there's only 12 of us or whatever, disappears because you've suddenly then, you're 6 years old and there's 250 people and not everyone remembers why we started and why we're different and whatever. And then the thing can go a bit more blancmangy.
Yes.
And then you have to try and rebuild that.
In terms of your experience, both, I suppose, in agency, but arguably in business full stop, you obviously have very much focused on agency life for the last 30-odd years. What stopped you from investing, say, capital that you have been given or indeed generated into other areas, other businesses, other markets? And, why have you been so focused in agency life?
I'm sort of quite convinced about the fact that as I get older, that, there's things I know a lot about, and those revolve around agency life and 30 years of experience, and there's things I know nothing about, and therefore I guess I have focused the money that this company has generated and investing back in people and talent that I sort of understand, and in some cases invested it in technologies often alongside WPP that we think we can deploy effectively for our clients. Some of those have gone well, some have actually gone pretty badly as well. I mean, listen, the business has been very successful, so we've won a lot more than we've lost. But for our clients today, it's about understanding, how do you sell in Amazon? How do you use Salesforce as a business to business tool if you're a subscription business or a B2B player? How do you use Instagram, Facebook, to target audiences and to find the audiences that are right for a brand? That we are better at of the brands that we work with than we are in inventing them. We will still invest at times we've invested in some video platforms, we've invested in other apps, but on the whole, my life as a tech investor on behalf of the And-Partnership has been probably limited success, and I think we're better off actually partnering via WPP with the biggest platforms.
So, obviously, over the last 28 years of my life, there's only been one major hiccup in terms of what's gone on globally, and that was the pandemic only recently. Now, in terms of you guys, 1,400 staff, 43 different countries, what went through your mind, Johnny, when the government essentially said, right, lockdown, close down, everyone works from home? How did you organise 1,400 staff to work from home?
Well, I suppose we went through the same kind of ups and downs that everybody else did. But I tell you what was interesting, if I just think of it specifically for our industry, at the very beginning of the first lockdown, everybody, and it starts with clients, their instinctive reaction, similar, in fact, to 2008. And I think it was useful probably to have lived through 2008 in a way at the beginning of the pandemic. So I sort of, it doesn't make you feel any more necessarily reassured, but some of the things you look at as it starts, you go, okay, we've been here, haven't we? Mm-hmm. And the similarities were an immediate kind of, the first thing you do if you're a big company and things look incredibly uncertain is you look at the expenditure that you've got that you can stop spending. Marketing, whilst we all spend our lives saying it's essential, and it is for growth and for brands to grow and etc. It's also something that if you're in the finance function, you can look at and say it's a lever that I can immediately pull like a handbrake and stop. And so, what happened in 2008 is everybody thought the world was going to fall on its arse, which it had, and thought, well, where can I immediately stop spending money in case I might even be worried about whether my business is going to go under? And so the first thing to go is marketing. Mm-hmm. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone pulled the marketing handbrake. And so, that was a scary moment for all of us, and you wonder how long it's going to last. I guess what was interesting after the first 3 months of the lockdown is you started to see some trends emerging. And I remember one that was particularly compelling and sort of changed the game a bit for us was in the UK, I believe the most popular, most watched show outside of sporting events and political events, etc., was Britain's Got Talent. And I think I'll get these numbers slightly wrong, but I think something like this. Pre-pandemic, 6 million or so people would tune in to Britain's Got Talent on a Saturday night. And, you might pay £60,000 to buy a TV spot in that show. As we got into 3 months into the pandemic, I remember like the second quarter of the pandemic, beginning of things, sat with the team. You wouldn't believe it, but I'm going to this meeting, so it wouldn't be on Saturday night. 12 million people watched Britain's Got Talent. And, it's, for me, not the greatest show I've ever seen.
It's very diplomatic.
So you suddenly go, okay, so that's gone from 6 to 12 million. And then but still nobody's advertising. So actually a spot in Britain's Got Talent's 30 grand. So you go, hold on.
Wow.
So this, I'm not brilliant at maths, but so what was 12 million and cost 60 is now, what was 6 million and cost 60 is now 12 million and cost 30. And at the same time, no one else is advertising. So if you did take a slot in there, normally you always think about share of voice. Yes, I've got that car ad, but aren't there 6 other car ads airing at the same time on different channels at the same thing? So, the consumers being promoted. Well, no, if everyone's pulled out. So we kind of went to sort of concerted, and it was a turning point for us across our business. And so across both traditional channels like television, but then increasingly across Instagram and all the platforms,
yes,
we suddenly started to see, hold on, the whole world is stuck at home and they're on a screen, whether it's a traditional television screen or a laptop or a phone, or if they're younger people, probably all three at the same time. And this is a huge opportunity for brands. And in some cases, if it isn't the opportunity for them to, buy a new car tomorrow morning or, make a purchase decision, it's certainly a great time to get their attention and build the consideration that will lead to them buying one, when we come out of this. And of course, there was an obvious thing that not just we, but lots of other clients and agencies that latched onto also, which was the ability also for big brands to try and do something, even if it was just show an affinity with the sort of sense that happened in the UK, but in every nation of sort of, we need to get behind, the essential services, particularly in the UK, it was the NHS, but, whether it was in Canada or the US, whatever, and saying, I think on every brand said, what could the companies we work for brands do to help?
So are you saying that that Tesco's, who donated their advertising space then to smaller local businesses, did so because the advertising space was cheaper?
No, I'm saying that two things happened. I think there was a general sense from all of the brands and people who work for brands that they wanted to do something. They could see everyone wanted to do, they wanted to help. And that if I'm not a doctor or a nurse, how can I help? My wife and I gave our Ocado slot, which was a precious thing, to my mother, because my mother, more traditionally wanted to go to the local shop and do her own shopping. And of course, what's interesting is, having had that,
she'd never look back.
No. And so, and I think that has happened in this pandemic. Is a lot of we have seen an acceleration in the kind of digital transformation of businesses. Of, I don't know, we're going to call it 6 years in 3.
Yes,
where in my wife's business, people having a whole array of clothes delivered to their house, so they can try on the ones they like, send back the ones they don't like, not be charged for it. Why would I do it any other way? And I think backing digital transformation of businesses through the pandemic, proved very fruitful.
And it's interesting, and some would think this is scripted because you were towing such a perfect line there in terms of saying that digital transformation has turned 6 years into 3. I had Sir Martin Sorrell on the podcast only a few weeks ago, and he was towing a similar line. But again, you were tipped to essentially take Sir Martin Sorrell's seat at WPP. He said on the podcast a few weeks ago that the wrong half a person, not the wrong full person, the wrong half a person is in charge of WPP. Do you still harbour ambitions to take Mark Reed's spot?
Gosh, he's quite cryptic, isn't he? What did he say? The wrong half
a person, I quote. Well, indeed. I mean, Mark Reed, for instance, who is you say is the wrong chap for WPP to drive?
Well, no, it's not the wrong chap. He's the wrong half a chap.
Okay.
He is Andrew Scott, who sort of disappeared into the background for unknown reasons. I don't know, because I think Andrew is immensely talented. I mean, Andrew has the abilities that Mark doesn't.
I have to say, I've said this a few times. I find it unfortunate that Martin spends so much of his time harking back to criticising WPP generally, and specifically, Mark Reed. My having worked alongside them all since 2007. You know, Mark Reed was nothing but loyal to Martin, acquired all of the digital businesses that made WPP as attractive as it was during that period through his understanding of it, and had absolutely nothing to do with, you know, Martin Sorrell's demise. And I'm not going to get into any of the whatever it was that did get into, you know, led to Martin Sorrell's demise. But I'd hazard a guess that he should be looking at himself, not Mark Reed, for that. And you know, but the other thing I'd say is that Martin has gone on to build an extremely successful business that's, you know, got a huge valuation in a very short period of time. As I understand it, he's made himself more wealthy, you know, personally in the last 4 years than he did in the previous 17. So why it is that Mark Reed has to have, you know, Martin Sorrell sitting up in the stands commenting on every substitution he makes, like poor David Moyes did on when Alex Ferguson retired. I don't really know, because Mark doesn't deserve that. Mark should be left to run the business as he sees fit. And I have to say, I think Mark's done a terrific job of maybe fixing some of the things that Martin should have fixed earlier. You know, Martin should have recognised that the traditional ad agencies needed to be allied to technology and media much earlier. And so Mark has had to do a lot of things that Martin should have done earlier. And I do think it's ironic slightly also that in having built a business, which was terrific, Martin did an amazing job, having built a business like he did that was very traditional in keeping all of these disciplines separate and being dogmatic about the fact that he wouldn't put them together, despite the fact that people like Mark Reed and myself were saying, surely that's what we need to do. But he refused to do it. And then when he started his own business, it looks very much like the business that I've built and Mark is trying to recreate, you know, WPP to be, which is about putting the people who create the content and the people who, you know, deploy the content in the same room with the client for as much kind of speed as possible to make most of the digital transformation. But, you know, that some of that sounds critical. Martin Sorrell's one of the greatest figures in the history of media and always will be. And therefore, I think it's even more therefore unbecoming for him to need to pick on Mark Reed. I've said that before and it makes him irate when I do. So I'm sure when this snippet is played to him, he'll get cross again. But
maybe we should get Mark Reed on as well, just for his opinion. We've had you, Johnny. We've had Martin. We should have Mark for the full three. In terms of when WPP actually came into your business, when they purchased that equity stake for 60 million, what changed for your business then? What were the challenges that you came up against with a far bigger business having a significant stake in your enterprise?
I mean, I have to say almost all of our experience with WPP over the last 14 years has been completely positive, and having just criticised most of my time with Martin was wholly positive until the end, when we very much moved our business to be the kind of single-minded entity that it is, that he felt sort of flowed against what he was doing with WPP. But I think, you know, had we not had access to the global infrastructure that WPP presented us with, had we not had the relationships with the technology companies that they had we not had the media might to put behind our clients, I don't think we'd have been able to build a business that went from whatever it was, you know, 80 people to, you know, 1,400 people in one country to 43 countries. And, you know, we've got just over $1 billion in billings, you know, and approaching 150 million in revenue. So WPP has been a fantastic partner for us. And I think, you know, we say this sometimes when WPP aren't in the room, we sometimes say, you know, our version of it is the best of both worlds, because we've got a sort of partner-led entrepreneurial culture that you'd find in a sort of small, agile organization, allied to all the media might, technology and global infrastructure of WPP. So in a way, we see that as the best of both worlds. But I have to say, my relationships with Mark Reed and all of the guys that run his different units, from MediaCom to Mindshare to Wunderman Thompson, Hogarth, etc., is fantastic. And you know, most of the teams that we build for our clients, we now build with elements of WPP as part of them. So we're pretty joined at the hip.
You said that when WPP aren't in the room, you say that. Now, what did you learn when you are sitting in the room with individuals and we're not on Zoom and we're looking back at lessons over the last couple of years?
It's interesting. You know, today I'm having this conversation with you. I had a breakfast with Piers Morgan to talk about a new show that he's launching and how we might help bring that your brand.
He's landed on his feet there. I think that could be quite interesting.
I think it'd be incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
I then went over to WPP and had a meeting with Mark, and then I went to see a whole number of WPP colleagues. And you sort of feel, having not done this last week, I was in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I went to see Robert Thompson at News Corps, and you suddenly think, gosh, it's great to be back.
Yes.
Much as it's efficient, as I said earlier on Zoom.
Yes.
Just to sort of get ideas fizzing and hearing what other people are doing, and making those different connections and thinking, well, hold on, if we did that with this, so much of that, I think, requires the kind of buzz of people being together and kind of being in the moment. And also, I have to say, much as it's convenient not to, leaving your house, right? Getting up, it's still good to get up in the morning. I had breakfast with Piers at 7:30 this morning because he had a Sky appearance later.
So normally he'd be on Good Morning Britain at that time, but now he's technically.
There are some reasons. There are some reasons why which we discussed, why he's not doing that. But actually, as you say, but I think he's now going to have a fantastic opportunity to launch, a global brand.
And what are you doing with Piers then? What is your role in Piers's next step?
Well, the same role that we play and have played, I guess, with news, around the world, going back to when we first started with them, 21 years ago, which is for us to help develop the branding and the marketing for the fantastic content they produce. And as I said to Piers this morning, actually, one of the things I've learned about media brands in America, if a guy comes on television and says, "My name's Bob from Bob's Autos," most people lean forward in the US and say, "Hey, Bob, what have you got to, sell us or talk to us about tonight?"
Yes.
If you say, "Hello, I'm, Bob Robert from Robert's Car Company in the UK," people in the UK go, "Sod off, Bob," and turn to another channel. And one of the reasons we had to develop creative advertising, I think, historically, starting with CDP through Lowe's to whatever, is that the British consumer is more cynical. And the reason that we had to make funny ads and creative ads and sensational ads was that, as Frank Lowe said, if we can entertain people for 29 seconds, they might not mind if we spend the last second telling them that was brought to them on behalf of Heineken, and they might just remember the brand and choose it over another. And, in some ways, that's an old-fashioned view of how content works. But interesting enough, when you say, what do we do for news or what do we do for Piers? The truth is the content that he creates and the news that he creates, simply by doing a tweet is fantastic content in of itself. And I think 8 million people following him every day know that. But I think our job is to put that in a kind of branded format that makes his kind of channel a success for news. So it'll be really interesting. But I think that's going to be a really interesting journey, launching a new show in at the same time in Australia, the UK and the US with Piers at the heart of it.
And we've alluded to the fact that you are essentially Don Draper from Mad Men, whether you love or hate that. Now, in terms of going back to News Corp, etc., and just slightly off the cuff with regards to Succession on Sky, whether you've seen it, I don't know. What are your thoughts on Succession being likened to Rupert Murdoch?
It's very interesting. I was talking to, I think, one of the PR people at News Corp, which remain nameless, who said they thought that had you seen Succession, it's that program about Sumner Redstone. And I think it may be influenced by a number of people, but clearly, it has some of the Murdochs very much at the heart of it. I have to say, I thought it was fantastic television.
I agree.
I think there's a second series coming soon, isn't there? Because I thought the last episode of the last series was left on such a fantastic...
No, Johnny, no. I've yet to finish it. I've only just discovered it. I've got another episode this evening, but I was baffled when they decided to come to Cheltenham for one of the weddings. Being based in Cheltenham ourselves, I thought a New York agency, international, decide to come to Cheltenham. Most odd. But Johnny, in terms of what success looks like and whether it's taking on the world like the Murdochs have done or whether it's, starting on a new path like Piers is doing, what does success look like to you, and have you achieved it yet?
So what does success look like? I mean, I like to think about success. I mean, that's what we call our company, our organisation, the And-Partnership. So it isn't just about my success. I hope if we're successful in the mission that we're trying to create is to make, a successful business for us and our partners. And I do also think, talking about this next generation being very different to the probably generation when I first started, I think people need to feel like success is much more than just financial success. Is about, having the right work-life balance, feeling fulfilled at work, feeling like that some of the work that we do is there to make the world a better place, not just to make ourselves, more commercial. So I think as we move forward, if we want to be an attractive company, success will be a different balance to the sort of success it might have been 15, 20 years ago. And it's a challenging environment for us. We compete, especially in our media business, with the likes of Facebook and Amazon and Salesforce, Google and Twitter for our talent. They have deeper pockets than us, however well we're doing. And in some of these debates about, I'm very much wanting people to come back to work, some of these platforms are saying people never need to come back to work, which I think is sort of unfortunate. So some people might choose not to work for us because they think, well, I don't want to go for work and I'm more there. So I think for us, creating a successful company will be about creating an environment that, yes, of course, for people, we're in a capitalist society, they want to make money and be able to use that money to enhance their life chances and their families and all those things. But I think people also want to feel like success is being involved in things that are intellectually valuable and are doing something for society. So I think we always need to be the sort of place that if you come and work for a company, you feel like, I don't know what's going to happen when I go to work tomorrow, and that's what I still love about my job. A lot of the things that we dream up and that we create, as I said, with whether there's some of the apps or something we've done, go nowhere. But you've got to fail in order to succeed as well, in this kind of business. And so I think success is creating, if not the most vibrant, certainly one of the most vibrant kind of creative environments in the 43 countries we're currently in. And I suppose if we do that well, maybe over the next 10 years we'll be in 83 countries, but I think I'll judge myself less on the number of places we are, more on how vibrant a place we are and, how much people want to come and work here. And to be honest, unless you're doing fantastic work and creating great ideas and changing things, we're in an oversupplied market. If I can't do that, then we won't be commercially successful because there'll always be other agencies and other entities that people can take their business to.
Completely agree, and promise me you won't tell Sir Martin this, but I've enjoyed this interview equally, if not slightly more, Johnny. But in terms of if I want to find out a little bit more information about you guys and how you're actually going to be growing over the next couple of years and keep track on the And-Partnership and all your charitable endeavours, how do I do that?
I'm sure you've got more than enough people to follow in social media, but through most of our handles, I think we try and keep people informed on our Instagram and on our Twitter feed and etc. of the campaigns we're doing and the difference we make for the charitable organisations that we work for. And I think if Christian's doing his job correctly, he tries to keep our global website updated.
Christian's been in touch today. He's been in touch asking. Yep.
So hopefully through that you'll be able to see what we're doing, but also feel free to give us a call or a message or whatever whenever you see anything we're doing, if you think it's either good, bad or indifferent of you.
Johnny, I genuinely appreciate your time. It's truly inspiring. Thank you ever so much and take care. Thanks for listening to this episode. For more information, check out the description where you can find exclusive video snippets on my YouTube channel, as well as contact details and links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support as always by subscribing. If you or someone you know should be on the show, please email me via oliver@pinpoint-media.co.uk and I promise I'll get back to you. Remember, there's never a good time to start a business, but in business, you should always have a good time. Take care. Success in the Mind is proud to be sponsored by Coronation Wealth Management, a professional service providing tailored financial advice to business owners, entrepreneurs, managers and clients looking to grow and protect their wealth or reach their financial goals. The team at Coronation Wealth provides services including retirement, investment, protection and business planning. To find out more, go to coronationwealth.co.uk. This podcast is supported by our media partner, Blokes and PR, who represent some of the most powerful brands within the luxury, lifestyle and fashion sector. Go and check them out at bloksandpr.com.